We want to talk about preparing our land for, planting. Because the planting season is not so far away. The Christmas festive season is done with. People are going back to default setting. Most of us are farmers. Maybe the mind is now shifted that, okay, now we need to go back to the farms and do the farming and make more money for the next festive season. So I wanted you to talk about land for bean farming. Which is the correct land, first of all, for bean, growing in the country? Can we grow beans in any kind of land? Is it possible? Or there is some preferred type of land?
Basically, beans can grow almost on all types of soils, if I may say that. Okay? Because soils are on different lands. Okay? But we need to select our soils and land areas carefully. Okay? Beans don't like marshy soils, or where there is a lot of water, or where water stands for a long time. Okay? If you grew a crop and you had a flood for a day, be sure to lose your crop. So when selecting land, be sure to have land that can drain easily, land that is not on a very steep slope, okay? Land that doesn't have stones, rocks and stones in the, So, or land that is crowded under very huge trees, because when you have a lot of shade, it means the light won't go through to the ground for these beans to be able to exploit the sun and make food. Okay, so the land should be a land that is possibly clear of forestry, of trees, too much shade, not on very steep slope, and away from marshy water. Waters where waters can easily flood, or that has a lot of stones, because these stones then will cover up the seed as you plant it, and the beans won't germinate properly. So really select soils that are free from any of those things I've talked about. Okay, any other soils, they can do well, although they shouldn't be heavy clay soils.
Why not?
The clay soils have a tendency of being too heavy and clogging the plants, such that the capacity to absorb water and to hold on to when there is no water is also a problem. So the beans then have to fight between trying to extract water from the clay, and also when the clay dries up, then the reverse happens. So there is the soil may crack, and you might not get a good yield, or eventually you may not get yield at all. So the soils at least have to have about 30% clay at most, not more than that. Sandy soils, not too much sand, possibly 60% is good enough, not more than 60%. And when we have sandy soils, then we specifically have to start looking out for varieties that do well, possibly in sandy soil, or in areas that don't hold a lot of water. And we've developed varieties that do well in drought areas. So we think when you have sandy soils, you have to look at those particular varieties. Two, why not sandy soil is that when the plant grows, okay, it puts on pods, and those pods are heavy, okay? And if you're in sandy soil and you're growing a heavy plant, okay, it may not hold and it lodges. So you may lose the crop, or you may lose the seed, and that is detrimental to your yields or to what you wanted to have, okay? So land or site selection is critical, really. Okay, and then after selecting the land, you've identified a good portion of land. at this time is real time in to go in and do now the first preparations. If they are bush or tall trees or shrubs, then it's time to cut them down. But also, they tell us to do a bit of soil test if we can. Or there are farmers who really know their soils. Please don't grow beans where the soils are too fertile. Okay?
Why not? That's strange.
Now, when the soils are too fertile, the crop will go into what we call as luxurious consumption. Okay? What does that mean? It means, do you know of children that are born in families where they have everything? There is a lot of food. It does not think about the next generation. And when that food starts to subsidize, by the time it starts thinking of creating flowers and, it's time up for the crop because it has a maximum lifetime, okay, of say 60 days, 70 days, or 80 days. Okay, so when the soil is so fertile, it goes into luxurious consumption and will bring a lot of leaves. You see a very good a crop that is vegetatively growing very well, but eventually it doesn't put on flowers.
Right.
Or if you are told it puts on just a few flowers as it senesces or it dies, and eventually you lose out. So please, as you look for soils, don't look for soils that have been in forest reserve for so long, because now there's a lot of nutrients. You'd rather grow cassava there or maize there first before you grow the beans.
Yes.
Okay, so that you reduce on the fertility. Also, when you are fertilizing, if the soils are so poor, don't put in a lot of fertilizers. Okay. As I said, if you haven't done a soil test, it becomes hard to gauge. But if you know your soils, you look at the crop that was there before, how did it perform? It performed excellently well, then possibly the soils, the fertility is enough for the beans, to continue with the next, to utilize. If the crop was fairly fair or bad, then you may think, or you may know, that I need to add a little bit of fertilizers here. And for beans, we recommend about, or if you're using NPK or DAP, we recommend about 50 kilograms per hectare. That's about 25 kilograms per acre or thereabout, okay, for you to supplement your crop. And that should be a one-time application at planting. It's normally enough, okay? But if you have grown your bean and you realize that, at about the vegetative stage, you realize, the beans don't grow in crops, yellowing, then you should either opt for nitrogen-based fertilizer, normally urea. If it's a little bit late, then you go in for foliar fertilizer to boost up the crop. But please select, because you're looking at land, select areas that are not too fertile for the beans, otherwise we go into luxurious consumption.
Interesting. And you did mention something about crop testing. I just want you to talk about, soil testing. I want you to talk about it because maybe some people can afford it. What does it involve?
Normally, at the moment, we have only a few labs that do soil testing. But I understand there are quite a number of what we call farm clinics that have access to soil kits. Okay, so there are the soil kits that might be available at local government places where agriculture extension officers can come out and help the farmers. Alternatively, farmers can sample their soils and send them to a laboratory where they can do a soil analysis and you get feedback. But in most cases, farmers don't know how to do soil sampling. So they can either call extension agents or they can refer to the National Agriculture Organization staff who are within and help. Alternatively, I don't want to get into the soil sample because it's a little bit of a technical issue, because you need to first look at the field really ascertain where there are differences and similarities, and take samples, multiple samples from places that are uniform. Okay? You take multiple samples, put them together, do a soil sample, or mix them together so that you can have a uniform homogeneity of those soils, because you take samples within a uniform sample. And then, because we said we've divided our field in sections that are similar, okay, and then go into the other section and also take samples there. So we have now 2 samples from seemingly same field portions.
Right.
So you will have 2 samples taken out and sent for analysis. So when that analysis comes, of course, you've labeled your samples. So, okay, this is a sample that came from here. So you know this area where we demarcated, which looks similar, has these nutrients, and this area has these nutrients. Okay, and you may apply now the deficient nutrients within the different localities.
So now I'm interested in this soil. You need to show us what soil this is so that we have a real example.
This, although it's waterlogged, but this is a loamy soil. Okay? When you touch it, you feel a little bit of silt or sand, you know, and a good portion it's a little bit sticky, which means it has a little bit of clay in there. Okay, and obviously because of the brown coloring, you know that there is a little bit of manure or organic matter within there. Okay, so this could be could be a very good soil for farmer to work with.
Okay.
Not a lot of sand. Okay, just feel the silt in there, not a lot of sand.
And it's what? It's kind of watery?
Yeah, because this has been irrigated, so really, but the clay helps in holding a little bit of moisture, but you don't need a lot of clay, because if it's a lot of clay, then it will crack as it dries out. Okay, and that's detrimental to the plant. So it has to be about, as we said, about 30% or less than 30% clay, and about 60% or thereabouts loam soil, and then the other component made by organic matter, something like that. That's basically the best soils you can have.
You also talked about not putting gardens in hilly places,
yes,
steep.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the whole of Western Uganda,
yes,
some part of Central.
Yes,
it's
yes,
hilly and all that.
yes.
So if I have
if
an
you
area
have
like that,
if you have an area like that, then you have to do measures. You have to undertake measures to ensure that you don't have a lot of runoff, or you divert the runoff. Because what happens in the hilly area is, if you planted and the rains come, they're going to wash away all that soil plus your seed with it. Okay, so you have taken measures where you do terracing or you do bands to ensure that you reduce the runoff or divert the runoff to areas so that you have water penetrating down and not just washing away the soil. Yes.
Yeah, so it's not in vain.
It's not in vain.
In
yes.
a hilly place,
it becomes a little bit costly for you, but that's what you have to do.
Get
yes.
the beans.
Yes.
Interesting. We want to plant beans. We have identified land, but what are those things I should look out for to see that, to know that maybe my land needs more attention? Maybe it's not in the best state. What can I look at and say, okay, maybe I need to do something more on this land?
Initially, I told you that in most cases, farmers know their lands and they have a little bit of history about their land. So the first thing the farmer should look at, or should familiar himself or herself with, is the previous crop. How did the previous crop look like? Was it a good yield? Was it a bad yield? If it was a bad yield and it wasn't due to diseases, okay, then he should have looked at the crop. How was the crop? Was it a good crop? Was it a bad crop? That will tell you whether the soil is good enough or not.
First timers, if I'm planting.
Okay, first timers, when you go to the field, okay, you look at the plants that are existing there. Okay, there are some obvious plants like the fan. I don't know what it's called in Uganda, but there's the fans. You know, those crops, the particular plants that show us or tell us a lot about what is happening in the soil. Okay, for example, those ferns, I don't know exactly what they normally we find them.
Can you describe it? Like?
They are normally found at the water sides. They are like wavy plants. Okay, green in color.
Like lilies. I don't know.
They almost like water lilies, but they have they a little bit have a solid leaf, but with either sharp or whatever venulations. Normally, when you see these plants, they normally identified with soil that are acidic.
Oh.
Okay. Then there is the Baganda call it kayuchi. That kind of plant tells you that this is a soil that is rejuvenating and normally very fertile in most cases. Where you find that sword grass or couch grass, this is the soils that have been drained of nutrients in most cases. Okay, where you find Commelinea species in Nanda, those soils are normally very fertile. Okay, so farmers in most cases have this bit of clue on these particular plants and that have a little bit of signage on whether soils are fertile or not. Now, if you see where you have the kayuchi bit, those thorny bushes, they're called thorny bushes, where you have the Commelinea species or Nanda, you know, those are really fertile soils. So those ones you can just, you know, grow. Where you have things like spear grass, where you have olumbugu or couch grass, those are soils that have been drained in most cases. And here you may need to do a soil test. Now, when you take your soils for tests, there are basically 3 or 4 things you are looking at. Okay, you are looking at the soil pH, how acidic or alkaline a soil is, because most of the beans require a semi-alkaline, about I mean semi-acidic. That's about 5 to 7. Okay, okay. If you have below 5, 4, 3, you know, those are normally very acidic soils. And if you have 8, 9, those are alkaline soils and may not be very good or so forth. So we need something close to 7, 5, 2, 6, and 7. We normally don't like very alkaline soils because of, you know. So you should look out for the pH. You should look out for the organic matter, how much organic matter there is.
When you say organic matter, make it simple.
The organic matter is the amount of organic carbon or the amount of plant debris, because it's from the plant debris and plant residues that we get more nutrients. Okay, because these plants ate from the soil. Okay, now they are giving back the soil. When they die and they decay, they give back those nutrients. So when you see, when they give you a soil that has high levels of organic matter, it means it has potential to be fertile. Okay, and the other is phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. Those are bigger elements that are required, and that's why you have, when you have fertilizers, you have NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are major nutrients that are required by all the plants. So the higher they are, the better the soil is. Okay. The others are important, but they may not be as important as these 3 nutrients.
So when you go to the lab, ask questions, and
yes,
get all the answers.
Yeah, you can be guided on those.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So how long should somebody prepare? At what point do we start? I know you had concerns about the weather patterns changing. At what point do we start? At what point do we end? and then maybe to cross over to the point of
our forefathers were very clever people, and they, you know, when you look at the way they named the months of the year,
yes,
okay, they actually were telling you what to do at a particular month of the year,
right.
for you to be able to, you know, to achieve your objective, especially because they were farmers. Now, in the month of January, normally, it's normally dry, okay, and this is where actually the clearing needs to start. Why really? Because you don't expect more growth when you clear, okay, because then the plants, that the weeds will die and dry, be able to dry, and that drying, because they are able to dry, they are able to be taken back within the soil, you know. So that month is supposed to help you do that. Dry, either remove and put on the side. Please don't burn, because you are losing a lot of things.
Oh, no burning.
No burning, okay. And where possible, although we don't advise it for beans, but for other crops may, we normally don't encourage the undecomposed material into the soil, because as it decomposes, it brings in the root rots, especially sclerotium root rot, which injure our plants on growth. Okay, so please, if there are things that haven't decomposed, don't incorporate them in the soil before they've decomposed, because if you do that, when you plant, as they decompose, they'll bring about the root rots that affect our beans at that between 2 to 3 weeks after planting. Okay, so please don't incorporate undecomposed material within the soil, for starters, if you're going to use organic matter. Okay, now you can use various methods of preparing land, either slash and dry, or slash and then use herbicides if you want to, and let you do the first cutting, what we call bush clearing, and then let it rest for the things to dry up. Then you come in and do the deep plowing. Okay, the deep plowing really helps you if the things haven't, the weeds are soft, they are incorporated in the soil to be able to decompose. Okay, then you leave the land for about 2-3 weeks. Okay, now at the end of January, coming into the first week of February, you come back to do the second plowing. Now, this second plowing is helping you to bring up, first of all, those undecomposed, and also help to uniformly distribute the composed materials within the field. Okay? That is within the second week of February. We expect that that will run up to, give that operation another 2 weeks, and that will come almost the end of February. Now, at the end of February, if you have time, you come in to till the land for uniform tillage, where you make the soil soft to be able to receive the seed. Okay? Now, by this time, we are sure that most of the materials we cut in January have been given time to decompose. Those who haven't decomposed, actually, you remove them and put them aside to prevent what I talked about. Okay? Then we expect rains to start coming in March. Now, we don't plant immediately when the rains come in. Okay? Because at times the rain are not stable. And if you plant immediately, the plant may take up that initial moisture. And when it takes up initial moisture, it immediately will start thinking of germinating. And if the moisture is not enough, it will die within. It may not even come up, but will die within, and you've lost your seed. In which I will talk about seed and see what kills seed, but most of it is about moisture content. Now, You leave the first rain, you may leave the second rain, and possibly plant at the third batch of rains. Okay? And don't go very far into the fifth and sixth. Possibly around second to third you should plant. Why? There's what we call the batch effect. Okay? Now, this batch effect is the first amount of nitrogen released by the decaying organisms that have been decomposing throughout that dry period. The plants utilize that particular nitrogen for their startup. So if you lose that, that's why people who plant later in the rains, even if you planted close to you, where the soils are fertile, may not get a good yield or a good startup of a crop as a person who utilized that first rains. Because the first rain, you see, when the rains start, you feel that sweet smell. Okay? That is the nutrients going off. Okay? And if the plants are already in the soil, they utilize that to be able, to absorb it. So if you lose it, you can't get it in the fifth rain or sixth rain, because I doubt if anybody will hear that smell unless it's on the roadside. Okay? But in the field, you won't feel it. Okay? And that means you've lost that. So as a farmer, you have to utilize that first source of nutrients. Okay? For you to be able to have a good crop.
First rain.
No.
Second.
Second, and the third rain is where we plant.